Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. We will slowly start and continue admitting people as we move forward with our program as well. Again, thank you for being here today. We are going to talk a little bit about the impact of artificial intelligence related tools and products, and also futures as it relates to communication professionals, also professionals across fields, the impact that it has on work. And we also want to think a little bit about storytelling as well. As we get ready to start the session, let me start by introducing today's lineup of speakers. Again, I'm going to moderate the conversation and hear from my colleagues today. But my name is Ekin Yasin. I am a professor and a director at the Communication Leadership Master's Program at University of Washington. Our program is very much at the core of thinking about emerging technologies and its impact on creative and communication related jobs, and as well as design related jobs, the whole landscape of jobs that has also been evolving with the technologies. A program that's been around for over 20 years, trying to navigate these changes and trying to make sense of how professional practice transforms with technologies and in response to technologies, as well as also with human impact and human first skills as well, which we'll dive into. I'm joined by two of my wonderful colleagues who I get to think and create a lot of curriculum with. They're both professors at the and faculty members at the Master's Program in Communication Leadership at University of Washington. Laura Bradshaw is a faculty member at our program and one of the key designers of our AI curriculum in the program as well. Lara has been spearheading a number of initiatives of creating short courses as well as master's level courses in thinking about AI and its impact on the field, as well as how to integrate it into various workflows, as well as taking a critical lens and thinking about AI literacy as well. Hello, Lara. Good to have you with us.
Yeah, I'm
And
excited.
and Lara also brings both academic experience and research in media literacy and thinking about impact of critical lens of media, as well as professional experience in various organizations and projects in AI and storytelling. So Lara has been bringing that lens to our classes. Uh, we also have Jay Howard with us. Hello, Jay.
Hello,
Good to see
good morning.
you today. Good morning. So Jay Howard is also one of our core faculty members. Jay is also involved in designing a variety of different new curriculum that responds to understanding impact of technologies, particularly with a focus on, Jay has been teaching a variety of really popular courses on branding and creativity, really thinking about how emerging technologies impact our creative workflows and creative professionals as well, educating our master's students. So now also creating initiatives alongside me and Lara to reach to learners all around the world as we make sense of what we're thinking together. So just to give you a sense of what's going to happen today in the session, I have a series of questions that I want us to all think about. Again, it's, I think, really vital at this moment to think about how technologies that that are kind of making a claim of transformation is impacting actual practice. And again, I want us to maybe examine this today from a lens of communication and storytelling work. And then also thinking through various junctures from workflows to creativity. And at the end, we want to tell you a little bit about how we are approaching and designing curriculum in this domain too, and tell you a little bit about upcoming initiatives that examine these practices and artificial intelligence impact on workflows, as well as, again, storytelling and creativity and upcoming programming around that as well. So the first thing that I wanted us to kind of start with, and what I'll do today is for the next hour or so ask Jay and Lara questions because they're experts in the field who are directly involved in teaching classes in this domain, as well as, again, creating curriculum and kind of keeping the beat in the industry as we create new curriculum in this domain. So I want to kind of make sense of this process with them by asking them questions. But if you have questions too, as we talk about it, please share them for those who are joining us live in the chat, and I'll direct them at the last 10 or so minutes to Lara and Jay, and we'll review your questions too. So please feel free to share with us if you have kind of questions on your mind as we go through different elements. And again, I want to unpack this again as in the way in which we're making sense of it in this moment. I'm surrounded by students and professionals, both in the U.S. but also around the world, and I often hear kind of experiences of workflows and how professionals are both anxious and hopeful due to new technologies. Sometimes more anxious, sometimes more hopeful, but something that I know that I've seen and heard, and we're also doing some research with both students and professionals along those domains too, is a transformation of workflows. In the past few years, in the span of, I would say, the past more concretely 2 years, all of a sudden, a lot of professionals have to integrate AI-related technologies to their workflows and how they kind of go about executing a task in both creative endeavors, in communication endeavors, in design endeavors, actually across all domains of professions, is quickly transforming. So I want to start our conversation with that, and maybe point a question to both of you about how, in your view, AI is impacting work and workflows and as we make sense of it and integrate it to our work. Maybe, Lara, we can start with that. I know that, again, these tools are really changing the way we execute tasks or how we spend a day doing a particular project or a creative endeavor. So how is it impacting our work and workflow?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the introduction and the context and background there. It's a great question. And, I think this is, as all of you probably are very aware, you are living this reality, or at least seeing this being discussed a lot on LinkedIn. And in general, right? I think, on a larger level, so, if we think about how AI is changing work, there's, at least in the world, I think about the world that we're in, right? Especially with higher education, but also, teaching professionals, right? Communication, content creative professionals, teaching them skills to go out into the world, especially with in this age of AI. One of the big considerations really is, thinking about how much, especially a younger generation, has been impacted by AI. So, we see different studies, but also a lot of conversation around, for example, around Gen Z. And of course, younger cohorts as well. And this isn't just Gen Z, but it does impact, right, those who are perhaps entering the workforce or early in their careers. Um, Probably a big conversation around this is trying to better understand what is happening as far as the skills involved with these roles, and what younger generations and younger cohorts need to learn as far as, what AI skills, but also, skills that potentially, connect, right, different sort of soft and technical skill sets with what they need to know, as they learn how to use, different sort of artificial intelligence technologies. There's that piece, and then there's also understanding, I think, at a larger level, what AI skills actually are. And as you mentioned, Ekin, workflows. I think some of the bigger, observations around this, and I'm sure we'll get into this conversation as it goes, is really, better understanding how students and how professionals are, rethinking various tasks, right, in their jobs. And of course, we're talking from a communications kind of content creative lens. But thinking about how, certain tasks are being recombined or, maybe one person is doing potentially tasks that were involved with other jobs, other roles. And of course, all of this is changing in real time. This is part of the challenge of trying to think about a changing workflow, changing career trajectory within a communication jobs in general. But I think, something that we're really exploring with our students here and in the program in general, as we work with, different organizations and different companies, is thinking about how students are preparing those skill sets, but also going into the workforce, and being able to develop really core competencies. So, this is something that Jay and I talk a lot about, who is my co-collaborator as well, and instructor, as Ekin mentioned. But really thinking about, how, especially soft skills, which typically get deemed as soft skills, right? Which, we might think about as communications, interpersonal communications, all sorts of communication type skills are actually really much more nuanced and complex. And this is something that, as we think about how it's impacting workflow, whether that is, designing content or, creating, for example, a social media piece, or like you're editing, right, a piece that will go out to an audience. These sorts of pieces become all the more nuanced when we add AI in. And so this gets into a broader conversation of how we manage it. What does it mean, especially now if we throw in agentic AI? How does that change our nature of doing different workflows? Especially with that in mind, but also with the soft skill aspect in mind. But I'll open it up to Jay as well, because I think this is a really great opening question and part of a much bigger conversation.
Hmm.
Indeed, yes, Jay. We'd love your perspective as also working, having been in the creative industries for so long.
Hmm.
I'm sure this is a big time, a deep time of transformation. What are you
Hmm.
witnessing in terms of changes?
A lot of changes, which are exciting and really good for, I think, in the long run for everybody, but at the same time, because they're coming so fast and they are coming every day and every hour, it can seem a little overwhelming to keep up with them. But I think what Lara and I are trying to, and Ekin are trying to do in this course, is to have a foundation to maintain them and keep up with them and integrate them every day as they come along. It's not the kind of thing where all of the AI knowledge is all set and we can rest on it and deep dive um, into a fixed base of knowledge, because it's evolving constantly. And so that's the exciting thing about it. We can identify the strengths and things that are going to help students get ahead of the curve, which is something that we focus on a lot, and being on the cutting edge of what is happening in the AI world so that our students can take the most advantage of what's available. And there is an awful lot. The good thing is that by having these skills and by keeping an eye open, we'll be able to, not just ourselves, but our students also will be able to integrate these things to make the work product better and more creative. What Lara and I focus on a lot is the primacy of you as the student, or you as the professional doing the best work possible, and you having your own distinct point of view, which is something that AI doesn't really have as much, because you have your own lived experience and your own interests in things, and AI is designed really in the way that we have it to supercharge your career in the direction that you want to go. So I think that's what I would have to say about it.
And maybe building on that, before we dive in, I want to learn more about, this, as you gestured to Jay, there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of transformation going on, and there's a lot of rethinking of skills too. But before we dive into that, and maybe we can go to the next slide, because one of the concerns there is also to your point is like how to manage that work. I know, Lara, you and I and Jay and I, positive and negative impacts of the in the slides you're seeing, the notion of work slop. I mean, slop has become, right, so much more of a dominant term. We're seeing it in a variety of communication products, a lot of content created online, because of also integration of these tools, and capabilities of being able to produce maybe more. But then that's not always good, right? Likewise, in terms of productivity too, the assumption that being able to have tools that have new capabilities being integrated does not always mean we're going to be extremely productive. So, Laurie, could you just speak to this notion a bit before we dive into the skills? Like, what does it mean to have this notion of work slop and productivity, as we kind of try to make sense of workflows?
Yeah, no, that's great, Ken. I mean, I think this is, something that, potentially everyone here, right, is paying attention to, or at least aware of, at least, or if not experiencing directly. But really, so this is a great article, from Harvard Business Review, really looking at some, different studies, but also this concept, right, as Ken just mentioned, around work slop, which, very much, right, we include the definition here, but, basically AI generated work, right, that is being masqueraded as good work, lacking potentially the substance, right, or like the human touch. And this tension, right, between AI work and then human work is very much at play here. Something that I know we'll get into, as far as I'm sure, with the conversation as it evolves. But it's something that, I think, students, professionals, this is very, very prevalent and also very noticeable. It's something where, if you go into this article and different studies around kind of this phenomenon, what's happening, there's, as I mentioned, there's this tension. This is something that you might hear a lot about, especially, I feel like this is very prevalent in like the career hiring world, especially with AI resumes. And so this is something that, this is an ongoing conversation, that, that is happening, that is actively happening around really, what makes something quality. Like, and this is this is something that Jay and I and Ekin talk about a lot and work with students and professionals around. Really, I think at the core of this, being able to understand, when an output, for example, is not, not up to quality, potentially when, when not to use AI in an instance, generative AI to, generate content, for example. It's tricky, right? There's a lot of nuance to this, and of course, AI is getting more and more sophisticated, and different, as far as how people are using, right, generative AI is changing as well. But it's really, it's really about how do we make sense of AI in this particular moment and have the skills, right? Have really core competencies around reading, writing, editing, research, that really kind of lay the foundations for when we actually use these technologies, right? So that we're not producing slop, and not just and also not accepting outputs, right? I think this is also the other tricky piece of it, and this is something that we, as a program, talk a lot about, is, the basically this cognitive offloading that can happen with generative AI use. And by that, really, it's like it sounds, right? So it's really having AI do the work for you. And again, there's nuance to that, right? And there's different, different sort of definitions and examples of that. But also studies, right, around, around how people use this technology, but also some of the concerns and dangers around, having, for example, AI generate an entire report for you. And this is something where we see this as a really big intervention moment, as far as, highlighting the possibilities of what generative AI technologies can do, but also knowing the limits. And part of the work is having a lot of self-awareness, right, around your own ability to discern.
Indeed, and maybe building on that too, like so that the self-awareness, I think that's a good kind of signal. to what I want to build towards. Maybe I can turn to Jay and come back to Lara. So this is, and if we go to the next slide too, like, it's a surprising time because on the one hand, these tools are able to, as you mentioned, Lara, like create reports, create an abundance of products, create an abundance of content. But that doesn't mean that we have good content, interesting stories, interesting, ways of engaging in the world. There's still the same, in a way, nuances that were required of us previously, of knowing kind of certain standards, having certain sensibilities that are at stake. And we hear a lot of conversations in our circles, but by various research and also makers of the tools, highlighting human skills and human knowledge still. So there's a lot of anxiety about what skills to focus on. So as we try to make sense of this moment, our work is changing. But what type of skills are on your mind that should be highlighted to ensure that we can co-create with these tools in an effective and thoughtful manner? Jay, what are some skills that you highlight to your students at this moment as they try to make sense of both the tools and the craft?
I think the skills that I highlight the most are critical thinking and individuality and point of view, so that each student has their own individual point of view and they're thinking in their own individualized way. As Lara was saying, the the thing about AI is you can create reports and do all of these generative things that can produce creative work in seconds, but that doesn't necessarily make it good or quality work. What makes it quality work is if the ideas are originating with you. So it's actually going to raise the creative bar in this age of AI that we're in right now, where the premium and the differentiation on original ideas and original thinking that's specific to you is much, much, much more valuable because it is very easy to create things that on the surface appear to be quality work. But as Lara was saying, there's quite a lot of slop. So, and quite a lot of lower quality creative work and presentations and thinking. And you just have to look at the first page or look at the beginning animation and look just a little bit closer, and you'll see that it doesn't hold as much value as it does as if it were an original idea from you. So that's what I instruct my students is the best ideas should always win, not the ideas that come from AI. They have to come from you. And that's the way that AI can really enhance your creativity when you use it as a tool. You don't look to it to source creative work. You look to it to help you.
Indeed, I think that's a really important reminder, kind of, still honing in on self-development, self-awareness, that critical lens that comes from the human and selection too, right? To your point, I know that a lot of our curriculum in our master's program, but also in our short courses and other curriculum that we develop, is very much centered around trying to cultivate those skills of identifying when when an idea maybe is one you should pursue, right? How to pick those ideas, how that creativity process works, because I think these skills and these notions are still very relevant, if not, I think more relevant, right? And I want to turn back to you, Laura. I mean, I know you think also a lot about this impact and highlighting skills. If we could go to the next slide too, like, there's still very much a negotiation going on, right? With our between ourselves and these tools and the skills that it's not about just the skills. I think what we're all trying to say is like this: the core skills are not the ones where we say just learn the tool. So what skills are on top of mind for you? Knowing these tools, teaching about these tools, building curriculum about these tools that you highlight in your, teaching and speaking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, I think This quote is great. I mean, Sherry Turkle's work is very relevant and worth reading in general if you haven't yet read her work, where she does a lot of, really interesting studies on robotics, which are obviously very applicable to this age of AI we're in, and thinking about conversation, where she has a whole book about conversation and research around conversation and human conversation. Something that I think about a lot. I teach a class on conversational AI, and this point comes up, this tension, right, comes up a lot. So this quote here, that feeling of friction in human exchange is a good thing. It comes from bringing our whole selves to the encounter. So really here, right, the interesting thing with Turkle's work is that she's really getting at what the human experience is, right? And especially in this moment of, advancing technologies, including artificial intelligence technologies. And she also includes social media, right? And there's a number of technologies that are at play here, where essentially, right, it's where there again, what's happening is that, as potentially as people become more isolated or feel more isolated, right, there's this turning to technology as a companion, as a comfort, as a source, right, for this human connection. But also, right, the point I think that Turkle is making, and this is the point that, I teach in the classes, and I know Jay as well, and Ekin too, is that, friction really is at the core of learning anything new. And, I think this is the tension with especially how generative AI technologies is designed right now, right? It is, I know we talk a lot, there's a quote from Ethan Mollick where you can press the easy button, right? This is the crisis, right, of being able to just press the button and have AI generate this amazing essay or piece of content or artwork. Or it feels that way, right? There's this kind of almost feeling of magic, in which it's not. But I think for our purposes, it becomes all the more important for students to develop these human skills, right, around communication, around being able to work with each other. And so I think about, discernment. Again, I know that we've talked about this, whether that comes to, being able to evaluate content quality and what makes something, understanding the logic and argument, right, for example, of content, but also discernment in the sense too of, understanding when to have humans centered, right, in a project or product that you're working on. And so it's not necessarily, this easy understanding, right? There's a lot of nuance there. And that's something that I focus on in the classes I teach, especially in content design, is really trying to understand when is it appropriate to use generative AI, and maybe when it's not. But also understanding this friction involved in our human exchange, right? When we work with other humans, whether we're working on writing, right? We want someone to review a draft of, we've written, or if it's, working on a product, right? Where humans are like central, right, to the output. But I had students work on like basically a career AI assistant, right, where that reviewed resumes and could give feedback, which, I think that's something that, is desired. It's very desired as far as, what technology can do, and feeding, right, or fulfilling maybe a source of what the technology can do to help students solve a problem, or help many people solve a problem, right? Getting feedback on one's career and career materials. At the same time, right, this is part of what I caution students, and what we talk about a lot is thinking about, what does this mean though when you don't have the human there? And how can we better think about these points in which we can involve humans, in certain points of a product or certain points of a workflow, and it makes that development of the content and the quality all the better, which gets more to Jay's point as well.
Yeah, so exactly, and maybe along those lines, like in the next slide, if we can go to it, we have a reference that I and many of us use. World Economic Forum publishes a Future of Jobs report every 2 years, and in that they highlight for all industries. Actually, it's a sector agnostic report that I actually integrate as a way of justifying kind of the types of skills and leadership skills and also technical competencies, the whole survey of necessary considerations for our students. The most recent one came out last year, and the iterations before actually was quite consistent with this too. And actually, we see that even though AI and big data are some of the fastest growing skills, indeed, people have to adapt to working with these tools, as you say, how to thoughtfully collaborate. Both of you are mentioning this, how to preserve your opinion, how to make decisions. At the same time, reports like this also highlight, right, to both your points about like this kind of instilling a sense of how to make decisions, but also yourself in the workflow more strongly, thinking about creative thinking in the adaptation process, resilience, flexibility, agility. But then to your both your points about that like learning component, right? That the friction and if to your point, Lara, if it's too easy, maybe it is not the right way to go about even using the tools. And this is something that I know that we instill in all our students is to use these tools to the point of maybe frustration, right? So that they are actually pushing you. They're starting with you, but pushing you forward as opposed to doing the work for you. And all of these skills mentioned by these global reports also speak to the new competencies that are required of professionals who make strategic decisions and also differentiate their work by basing it in their own selves, but then also kind of thinking about how to adapt it to their context thoughtfully, both understanding the context as well as themselves, to both your points. Along those lines, one, in the next slide, we have a term that I know, Lara, I'll turn to you, and then I want to go back to Jay, that we talk a lot about in our, overall curriculum in courses we offer globally that we will offer this summer, but then also in general in our classes and a program too, is just thinking about like advocating for something we call AI literacy, right? And this is still much more of a discussion. I know a lot of people talk about AI literacy, but what is it really to be literate in
Yeah,
AI? So it's not just AI skills, right? But there's another component. There's the to be literate too. So what is this term?
yeah, no, it's a great question. Yeah, and I think a lot of people have this question, and we're figuring it out too, right? This is the beautiful thing about where we are right now. I think as Ekin mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, a number of us come from media background, communication, media studies background, and so media literacy, I think, is very central to thinking through potentially an AI literacy definition. And essentially with that, basically what we mean is that it's really understanding, not just the technical piece, of course, right? I think that comes front and center when you think of especially artificial intelligence technologies, but it's more about understanding the context of the technology, right? And by that, it's understanding how technology socially, culturally, politically, economically fits within the world. Right, which is a broad lens, but it's a lens in which better helps us understand, especially a technology like artificial intelligence, right? There is a longer history to it. And there's different sorts of technologies that have come along the way that are influencing artificial intelligence technologies, which becomes really important to put that into a conversation with each other. I think this becomes all the more relevant, especially now where we see generative AI, right, being able to, make video, image content, right? And this is all, of course, borrowing from earlier iterations of different communications technologies, right? Cinema, television, social media, right? This is all influencing it. And so I think from a definition lens of what AI literacy is and how we try to help students and professionals approach it is to understand that AI does not live in a vacuum, right? It's part of a broader cultural context, social context of technologies. Also, the literacy piece, it's understanding the technical components, but, from our perspective too, it's understanding how this technology, how we use it, right? How as consumers we use it, but also how as designers we are part of building it. And there's different decisions and choices we make along the way with any technology, right? That's not just artificial intelligence. But I think from an literacy perspective, there's something to being able to understand how, what we're putting out into the world as much as what we're consuming within the world regarding generative AI.
I think that's a great segue to my next question. What we're putting out in the world. I think the world of, we started with this, Jay, creativity and storytelling, two areas that you're deeply embedded, are changing. So not just the skills and the careers, but like, could you reflect on our definitions of creativity and like how we approach our storytelling practice? Then I'll go back to Lauren, asked the same question in terms of storytelling too. Like as these fields evolve, I think the practice is evolving too. So how is their perception of creativity is changing, right? And how are we kind of creating in this moment?
That's a really good question. And I think how we're creating in this moment is to focus more on our own levels of deep thinking and our own originality and our own lived experience. Because one thing that we do know is that AI does not have lived experience. We're the ones with lived experience. So things from our childhood, things we've experienced at work, things we've experienced in the real world, and we're using AI as a tool to explore some of those things. So it's really focuses on us as professionals to weave together this kind of interdisciplinary view of the world using AI, because it's very helpful in doing that and helping us to understand. But the creative aspect of it and the creative part of taking two totally disparate things and putting them together relies on us as professionals and relies on the students as professionals. And that's what AI helps us do. Like Laura was saying earlier, friction is so important. And sometimes we see AI agreeing with us all the time or being kind of sycophantic and saying, yes, you're right, you can do this, you can do that. But in our lived experience, we want people who challenge us and push back on us. So we take the AI as one input to help us get to where we need to go creatively and make that entire creative output as differentiated and unique as possible. And it does help us do that, but it really helps us source the creativity from within ourselves.
And I think we have kind of an example of this too. I know that we have a mood board example in the slides that we wanted to bring up, because sometimes, right, like as you're mentioning, Jay, like thinking through, like these are not abstractions that we approach, right? There's ways of concretizing this process. So if we could go to those slides, we had the kind of the mood board assignment as a way of kind of thinking through, right? Because creativity is not again an abstract process. We concretize it in our process. Could you speak to this a little bit as a way of kind of how we translate that, what you just talked about, into curriculum?
Yeah, and this is a really good example of the discipline of creativity, because when we make films or write books or generate creative work or create art, it takes time and there's a discipline and a technical aspect to it. And what you're seeing right in front of you right now is a, according to AI, is a mood board, which is something which is really a visual document that's used in filmmaking to help clients in marketing get a sense of what a brand film could look like, and it's very visual. So I was asking one of the AI applications, can you create a mood board for me? And for this particular product, which is a Animal Crossing, it was for an initiative in the state of California to help animals cross highways so that they wouldn't endanger other people in cars or create a more safe environment. So they would build these bridges across highways in the state of California. So when I asked for a mood board, this particular AI application said, okay, here's a mood board, and gave me a bunch of text, which described a mood board, but it didn't understand the definition of what a mood board was. So the first thing is it gave me a lot of text, and if you go to the next one, I tried it again, and I said, well, that's not a mood board. Can you give me a mood board? It's more visual. And this time it gave me a bunch of different colors, which is still incorrect. So it didn't have the craftsmanship or the lived experience that an author, an art director, a creative director, a graphic designer would have in the professional world. It wouldn't have known how to do these things. So it kept giving me the incorrect output. And that's where we rely on our lived experience to guide it in the right direction, because it hasn't had that experience working in film or working in animation to understand what these terms mean and what I'm asking of it.
Maybe I can then bridge into like, right, so there are these gaps in the way in which it creates, and I think there are some questions coming up too, so I want to create some time for those too. So as we kind of think about the next generation of practice of creativity, storytelling, we really have to be careful about how we approach the process. And I think frustrations like this, Jay, is a kind of part of the motivation for us trying to create a thoughtful curriculum that prepares the current and future creatives, storytellers, communication professionals to how to navigate, right? On the one hand, having these tools, but on the other hand, understanding the transformation and using it effectively, thoughtfully, critically. So maybe this is a good segue to engage both of you. And in the next slide, we share the fact that we have a summer academy coming up, and one of the part of the work that we've been doing is this summer academy is a first of its kind for both graduate and undergraduate students all around the world as well as in our region. And it's an initiative that actually comes exactly from junctures like this, right? On the one hand, the tools exist. On the other hand, the titles of the work exist, but there's a disjuncture. So we really all collectively were very motivated to expose emerging practices, emerging questions, emerging tools together. So if we could go in two slides, we have kind of a flow of the logic of the curriculum. And the modules, if we could go to the next one, Khan. So I want to ask you both kind of like the logic and the flow. So if someone is, I think this is a good way of thinking about how storytelling practitioners also what they should be thinking about right now with these tools. I think your curricular design for our summer academy is a good response to how to make sense of it all. So could you speak to that a little bit about why these modules and what they speak to?
Yeah, thanks, Ekin. And yeah, Jay, I think, I think with this particular curriculum, and I think this as this conversation is illustrating, right, there's definitely like core competencies around, around self-awareness, around being a human, right, using this AI technology to help augment, to help enhance, but also, at the core of it, right, really better understanding how to be a storyteller, right? And this is the distinction that we're really excited to explore in this particular 2-week program. But I think what really kind of centers it is that we want students, because we're for this particular cohort, right, we have advanced undergrads, graduate students. It's really important to center on core skill sets, right? So we focus it in this case around storytelling, around learning kind of the essence of how to tell a story, understanding character, plot, point of view, audience, messaging. And as you might think, I think we all can agree that AI definitely we can prompt AI to do storytelling, right? That's no question. But as Jay, right, he just illustrated with the mood board example, and that's one of the assignments that we will go through in the course. is, it's more than that, right? It's more than just being able to prompt something or to engineer something, especially if you don't necessarily have the deep background to understand what you're asking for. And so this becomes all the more important and relevant. And this is where the tension is too, right? This is what we're exploring and what we believe is very worth exploring. But really, the focus for this class is understanding, what are the repetitive, repeatable tasks, right, that AI can do in storytelling, in content, in creative process. We might think of it more as like project management, right? There's pieces, right, that AI can support, especially in developing content. At the same time, right, as we get into, module 2 is focused on human creativity and responsible storytelling. This is really kind of the crux of, understanding, where innovation and creativity lie, and also where we can potentially access AI's capabilities to support us, but also not over rely, right? And so again, we explore this distinction. And where we can develop, we'll do mood boards and storyboards. I know Jay also had this really interesting use case around storyboarding, where, again, like going back to the mood board example, understanding how a story flows, how a shot sequence will work, right? If you're doing an ad campaign, for example, this becomes so relevant. And of course, yes, you can work with AI to kind of prompt that, but at the same time, if you don't understand what you're asking and then how to evaluate it, it becomes more problematic. And this is, again, this tension we want to explore. So it's really helping students develop core skills around storytelling and discernment, at the same time understanding how to use AI effectively. And again, like when the limits are, and then when you can further ideas along. And it's all about this kind of tension and exploration, which by module 3, right, because we have a global cohort, we're really curious about and wanting to think through kind of the global resonance and what's happening with AI technologies. There's a lot of conversations around, just especially around with large language models in particular, a very Western focus around the language piece, which is really critical to understanding, again, how the technology is working, how the outputs are working. But I think what will be helpful in this particular class is that we want to be able to dive in and better understand, global story, how global storytelling works, how we can understand cultural, local nuance with storytelling, and how we can work potentially with different sort of AI technologies to play with it, to potentially create something that is more usable, depending on where you're operating from in the world and the cultural context that's needed. But again, this gets into the big core of the class, is really understanding these distinctions and being able to have this literacy lens towards the technology, and not accepting the outputs exactly, but being able to evaluate them with this very deep set of self-awareness.
And maybe I want to bridge this to a question that we got in the session, and direct it to Jay. Jay, I mean, I think that's the kind of the modular design maybe speaks to this question. One of our participant asks, and I think when we were designing this curriculum too, these type of tensions were directly on our mind. So I want to bridge it to that. I think it is. Sayman, who's with us today, asks, AI makes many things easier, but the work it creates is needed to be checked by a competent person, to your point earlier. Otherwise, we can easily see cannot see, right? We can easily see the problems in it. How, in this new age where the education and technology changes rapidly, we can improve ourselves to be competent enough to stay as creators, that has roles in industries. I know that some of the kind of content here is speaking to that, but how do creators stay relevant in this moment, and how does it speak to some of the things that we're discussing in this course, but also we're teaching broadly at this moment?
I think the way creators stay relevant is to bring their own lived experience and their own curiosity into the picture, because they're going to be making lots of different connections based on what's in their brains. So, and it the idea is that the creative product, hopefully in a work setting or for a company or a marketing campaign or whatever, will be very distinctive and unique, and it won't be mimicking something else. So the one thing that AI does very well is give the appearance of competence and give the appearance of creativity. But like Lara was saying, once you examine a little bit more closely what it's outputting, because it does not have any craftsmanship or apprentice work in the real world or learning art over the course of 40 years, once you scratch the surface a little bit, there's not a lot below. So it relies upon you as the communication professional to use it to realize what your thoughts are and realize what the creative output you want to have. And that's what's very, very valuable. And it can really do that, but you're the one who's in charge. Um, so it is important not to rely on that first output, but you're really the source of pulling all this interdisciplinary information together in your own head and then harnessing the AI to really create something very, very valuable for clients and so forth.
Exactly, as I think as the holder of the context, right? Like the being able to feel and understand and kind of live the history as opposed to write the history, right? Of the human evolution. That's, I think, something really important when we create stories. I mean, we're at a moment where our program, within our program, but also across industries around the globe, storytelling initiatives remain as relevant, right? But from human-centered podcasts to videos to kind of brand products that highlight those human aspects. And again, there's still a kind of a tension there that you so wonderfully mentioned, Jay, because it's again like the interpretation of that context is so hard to do for AI at that moment, at that particular, right? Like that back and forth also that I know you are so familiar with, like with a client, where they, where they give you feedback and then you internalize and there is that, like, we're also trying to tell a story. I mean, these are all again human components. So I'm really excited for this multifold design of our curriculum that I think will really also dive deep into that um, component of retention. What do we retain? What we invest in? As we create stories, as we tell stories, and then also, as you, Lara mentioned too, and do it responsibly. We're at a moment where we're all, not only seeing some of these tools, create maybe nonsensical output, right? But sometimes irresponsible output too, right? The checking is not so that it's inaccurate, but that it's often also could be, depending on which tool you use, harmful if put out in the world where, am bombarded each day by AI generated content that may or may not have misinformation or disinformation. And that doesn't always claim or acknowledge the fact that it's done by AI tools versus representing, right? I know that, for instance, Lara, we're going to have in one of our upcoming classes, one of our other faculty members, Chang Liu, who works on this, right? Human avatars and representing humans. Like, these are all new tensions that we have to also explore to add another dimension to it.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Ekin. And I think, I one of the key pieces there is, really, having better context, right? That's something that we really highlight in the communication leadership program in general, but especially in this particular program over the summer. We are going to think about context and how, I mean, again, having cultural awareness, having awareness in general. And this of course goes towards, building a product, creating messaging, right? And this is something that, across content communication teams, that's really, really relevant. I think there's, a number of examples, right, where, images are generated, right, for potentially for a media campaign. And especially if you're representing human beings, this is where it becomes all the more tricky and problematic, right? If you're not considering, right, the people that your audience that you're representing, as well as considering, again, how often these large language models, right, where the training data is coming from, how bias is kind of baked in. But again, that with that lens in mind, that we can use these technologies, but we have to be hyper aware of what the outputs are and how we can control that and how we can think through it and then how we check it right along the way. So it's not, as Ekin mentioned, right, it's not just about fact checking. It really includes a larger cultural context and awareness of what we're putting out into the world and not just blindly accepting something because that's what we get and it looks pretty. And so this is where discernment becomes all the more important, especially as we get into conversations about using the technology responsibly.
Indeed, right? Just this past February, a major fashion brand used AI-generated ads and had a big backlash, not because the images did not correctly represent the actual product, but that they one didn't acknowledge, but then also why the why is was there. But then, in this abundance of representation too, the choices that AI makes versus humans make become much more an important tension to mention. As we wrap up the session, I just want to kind of remind everyone a couple things that are coming up. Again, as you see, our faculty, a wonderful faculty, and all of us are really excited to explore these topics. And we really believe that it's a global mission right now and a global need to have more spaces where we learn, converse, experiment with these tools to understand what human first skills are of this moment. Humans still matter. Communication is one of the most forementioned skills. The co-founder of Anthropic, one of the largest AI companies right now, when asked what's the top skill they would mention at this moment, mentioned communication related, right, skills across domains as the core one that they would highlight. So with that mission and with that urgency, we created a bunch of learning initiatives where we want to convene. We're one of the main hubs. We've been leading conversations on this subject matter for actually a decade in our program, even before the deployment of AI tools, because University of Washington in Seattle, of course, as many of you are familiar, is in the home of companies like Microsoft, Amazon. So in our immediate landscape, we were seeing early signs, but now it's everywhere. So again, we are really committed to creating learning spaces for this with our wonderful faculty who's already doing it on site. So we have two upcoming opportunities as a part of this mission. The first of which is you're seeing on the screen, communication in the and storytelling in the age of AI, in AI era, coming up this summer. This is an in-person academy for 2 weeks at University of Washington campus, one of the most beautiful campuses in Seattle, taught by our wonderful faculty members, Lara Bradshaw and Jay Howard, who are here with us, who again are going to go through these modules. But more importantly, you'll work in teams, creating AI artifacts, sharing that with key professionals, hearing also from practitioners who are in AI fields about how they're integrating this into their workflows each day. As Lara and Jay mentioned, has like a thoughtful dedication to one of the modules. So it goes from module 1 to module 3, covering how storytelling and communication and creativity is transforming in this space. But each morning session is followed by creative assignments. And in the afternoons, we'll have a really fantastic kind of lineup of speakers from, again, key companies who are building these products, as well as people who are using these products. So it'll be a fantastic 2 week hands-on learning session. So if you scan the QR code, you can find more about it. It's an in-person session, again, designed primarily for advanced undergraduate and graduate students in the US and around the world. So all are welcome. You can read more about how to apply for it. We encourage those who are applying from around the world to apply in the next week or so. The application process doesn't require any payment processing or anything. It's just an early form so that you can have your visa processes in time for August. So the application process allows us to invite you to the program that allows you to participate in the program so that it's on time. Another thing that I want to mention again, that's highlighting these two wonderful experts in the field and designed by them as well. Last fall, we offered Empowering Marketing and Communications with AI, which was a very popular course that reached hundreds of learners in our region and beyond, as an online short course, asynchronous with support from faculty. So we still have in-person online faculty, real-time faculty session to where you can ask questions. The second version of that course, so if you've taken the first course, you can take this or you can take this independently. Online is coming up on May 11th. And this new course is called AI-powered creative workflows for marketing and communications. The applications will open soon. It will go from May 11th to June 28th. Again, it's designed to be asynchronous so that wherever you are, you can access the course materials, but you'll also have what makes these courses unique is you have the direct support and expertise and learning input of the faculty that teaches in our master's program that work with our short course participants, in this case, Lara and Jay, who are amazing educators and experts in the field. So that's online. Our academy is in person. So that's coming up in May as well. Again, these are all part of a broader initiative for us to lead conversations in creativity, AI, and communication, as we believe that this is a really important pivotal moment all around the world where professionals are trying to make sense of really important things. Lara, Jay, thank you for joining us today. And thank you everyone for joining us in this session. You can email comleadacademy@uw.edu either about questions about the short course or the academy as well. So that email is monitored by many of us. So we'll get back to you. Again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.